thanks for joining us today.
Sure thing.
Could you tell us your wonderful story of taking your company from a startup to possibly one of the top embedded electronic services company in terms of design, value chain, and now the whole story from start to finish?
Well, that's a long story,
Yeah.
Anas. I don't know whether you have patience to listen to all of that. But I used to work in USA. I worked in the Bay Area for almost 10, 12 years. But somewhere in the middle, in the back of your mind, when you are out there, you say, God, I think I need to do something big, or I need to do something different, right? Everybody has their own Mount Everest. And my Mount Everest was sort of emotional. I was born and brought up in Ahmedabad, India. And Ahmedabad never has been known as a technology company. There is no high tech here, right? It's all historically textile based, and then a lot of pharma and all of that, but nothing to do with the electronics, nothing to do with the software and all of that. So somewhere internal, innate desire was that my chosen profession is electronics, software, computers. Why can't we do something in Ahmedabad? Because there is plenty of raw talent all over India, right? Sure, it's going to be a tough journey, it's going to be rough, but why can't it be done? And my wife always tells me that I'm one of the most stupid guys in the world because I always did, I ended up doing the things which are much harder to do. But I think that's where the satisfaction is also the highest, right? If you do the toughest things. You probably remember the impossible challenge that you had in your life and you overcame. But you don't remember what you ate yesterday or your flight to London or wherever you went, right? So the things which are uneventful, things which are easy, I think our systems are wired not to remember them permanently, but the things which are very difficult to achieve, the sense of satisfaction, sense of achievement is at a very different level. So one day I decided that this is it, I'm going to go back to India and do something in India, and especially in Ahmedabad where there is nothing. There were several reasons. One was emotional, family ties and all of that. Second is that my value add to the earth can probably more in India than in USA, right? I'm one of the 10,000, 100,000 engineers in USA, cog in the wheel. If I go to India and do something, maybe it will generate some economic activity. It can also create something in society from nothing, right? And that was the sponsoring thought, if you will. That was the reason why I moved back to India. And it was a huge risk, right? Because when you come back here, you don't know whether you're going to succeed or not. And by the way, I'm an old duffer, so by the time I moved back, that was 30 years ago. At that time, India had a license Raj. The phones were rotary dial phone, forget about mobile phones, right? The scooters and only one car, Maruti 800, and you wait for 10 years before you get your scooter or a phone or a car. That was the economic liberalization that existed in 88, 86, somewhere in there.
You came around that time?
I came around that time, 32 years ago, right? So I had another company before this, which I ran for about 8 years. Then I sold it to my partner. And around in 94 time frame, liberalization had happened in India. People were talking about the software exports. That was a Y2K thing was going to happen. And you probably were in the chaddis, in shorts in your school. But there were reports of big opportunities in the software, right? And so I looked at the Y2K reports. I said, software export looks interesting. We should get into that. I should get into that. And the reason was also fairly straightforward. Service business doesn't require a lot of capital expenditure, right? Having said that, your assets walk out and walk in every day. So you have to believe in people and you have to take big risks on people, right? Mentally, you have to be ready to do that. Only then you can do that startup in the software and services and all of that. For which I was ready because some of my employees tell me that I have a atma of a teacher, that I love professing and teaching and coaching and mentoring and all of that. They hate it when they are getting it, but 5 years down the road, they absolutely love it, saying that, we were not listening to you at that time. 5 years down the road, after experiencing 10 years down the road, right? We understand what you are saying, and it stays with us. So after acquisition, a very interesting story, short story. I go to California and Bay Area in US about 5-6 times a year. So we call them chipmates. All the InfoChips employees are called chipmates. So chipmates are the ex-employees, right? They still keep in touch. So there are about 100 of them in the Bay Area. So they all decided to get together and invited me, and they told me the stories one after another. The common theme was this, that you beat us up when we were there, and we love you for that, because what you taught us, nobody can taught us. And there are whole videos on that, but that's satisfying. That's immensely satisfying.
Amazing. Yeah, and I don't know if I can ask you this. If you count the number of zeros?
You can ask me anything. Doesn't mean I'm going to answer them all, right?
Did you count the number of zeros after the acquisition and the money came?
It's not a big number. I mean,
What crores?
Yeah, it's about $300 million. So, eight zeros is not a big number. Not in these days.
Plus
when you look
zeros
at
of 300.
No, that included, right? Million is 6 and 2, 8.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
That's not a big number. Not when you look at the stories like Flipkart.
Yeah.
And,
too much to count.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
but that was the reason I came back and started this company.
That's amazing, and that's goes on to prove that I myself am like that. The reason I applied to Oxford and only to Oxford is to come back to India.
Okay.
And apply anywhere else. Because that time when I applied to Oxford, Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister of India. So
right.
Oxford. So I felt, maybe I should get back to politics, do something good for the state.
Yeah.
And after I started my studies, I realized that I'm going to be bad at politics because I'm a very candid person. I can never be
politically correct. Yeah.
So I decided to stick to entrepreneurship.
I think entrepreneurs does have that common streak of being a rebellion and politically incorrect in a certain sense, being black and white to a certain degree. But then over a period of time, I think people learn.
What is the toughest point in life wherein you felt like giving up and then like, no, I'm going to fight and get back? Because most of the entrepreneurs, sometimes, they reach a point of giving up and they either give up or sell out inadvertently and then...
Right. So this is my personal theory, Anas. What I believe is that if you're going to start something, you have to be very passionate about it. And what I call the sponsoring thought, the motivation, the objective has to be very clear in your head. Is it to make money? Is it to get famous? Is it going to contribute to something? It's going to mentoring people? What is it? What is it that you're after, right? And that sponsoring thought, if you're very clear about it, then getting tired becomes that much less of a problem. Right? And my personal advice to the entrepreneurs, if you're going to do it for the money, set up a timeline that I'll do it in the next 5 years, I'll do it in the next 7 years. If it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out, right?
Yeah.
Because it's very difficult to get motivated by money all the time on a daily basis. Again, what I tell my people is that you need oxygen for living, right? You can't live without oxygen. But do I think I'm inhaling oxygen every time I breathe? I don't.
Yeah.
So when you get up in the morning, you're not going to think about, how much money I'm going to earn today.
Yeah.
You're going to think about your next customer. You're going to think about the guy who's quitting.
Yeah.
You're going to think about your supplier. You're going to think about the office space. I mean, you'll have 10,000 problems on your head, right? And you are going to get busy solving them. Now, if your main question is how much money I'm going to make today or tomorrow, then you're going to get distracted by that. And then you're going to get tired.
Yeah.
This is my personal opinion,
That's true.
but for whatever it's worth.
The passion is here. Absolutely.
And so I also define 5 Ps for the entrepreneurs. One is passion. You got to have boatloads of that, right? You can't run out of supply of passion for your cause. Then you will not get tired, to your point, right? Second is people. You must be willing to work very tightly with the people and motivate them, inspire them, get them to the next level, invest in them, all of that, right? And no matter what business you are in, you're going to need people, and they have to rally around you, and you have to inspire them, you have to motivate them. Third is persistence, because as the world turns, the technologies are becoming quicker and faster and better, everything, right? And in that kind of changing scenarios, you really have to persist for long periods of time. If you get tired easily, it's that much more difficult to succeed. Succeed requires persistence. Fourth is patience. In the same vein, you have to be patient about the things. Star Wars, I don't know whether you are a Star Wars junkie or not, but there is this creature called Yoda, right? He talks about being patient. So people, passion, persistence, patience, processes. Because when you are an entrepreneur, you are doing everything by the seat of the pants, right? Once you get to a certain size, you have to have the respect for the processes, because that's how the scaling is going to happen. Otherwise, you end up doing transactions, and how many transactions you are going to handle. And then you have to start establishing the processes, whether you are doing manufacturing, you are doing retail, sales, services, whatever you are doing, right?
Okay.
So these are my 5 P's for the
My
entrepreneurs.
question is, have you ever felt that you want to stop, quit everything? No, you never felt that because you're strong about your 5 P's, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think in 22 years of my journey, I was very clear in my head that I'm not going to give up. I'm going to make it good. Other thing is that I cared more about the excellence in my business than what I call excellence driven than ambition driven. And there are positives and negatives of everything in life, but that's what gave me the satisfaction, that the quality that we bring into the table for our clients, the organization has to be wired and built, which is driven by excellence, not necessarily by the volume, but by the excellence. So similarly, I think your focus should be very clear.
And philanthropy, have you been donating?
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons I moved back to India, right? Early on I told you that my Mount Everest was doing something in Ahmedabad in technology, but even on a slightly broader and bigger scale, if you look at India, there is abject poverty, right? 400 million people, less than $2 a day. How do you survive? And with the capitalistic system, I love it, but at the end of the day, the inequality is growing up like crazy. There are some reports somewhere that 64 people have equivalent of half the wealth of the bottom half of the Earth's population. I mean, 3.5 billion or 4 billion people on one side, on the other side 64. Where are we heading, right? Forget about everything else. Even for the purpose of selfish interest, for my self-interest, if nothing else, I better do something about these 400 million people in India who are struggling to make a living, right? And in my mind, education is step number 1, because if a person gets educated, he can become an asset. Without education, an illiterate person is certainly a liability to the society. So more people we can convert from being illiterate to education, who can go for the higher level of education and contribute to the economic activity of the society, better are the chances of of India getting to the next level. So with that thought in mind, we started, in my father's name, I started something called Dr. K.R. Shroff Foundation, which is focused on education in the rural areas. And just like InfoChips, we came out with a little bit different model than most of the NGOs. I said, number 1, management philosophy is whatever you measure, it will improve, because you will get focused on that, right? So I said, if we do the education, we are going to measure the success or failure of our efforts. And we'll measure the test scores of every child, why it's not where it needs to be, what are the reasons, and all of that, right? So with that, we came out with a software called S2T2. S2T2 stands for Serving Society Through Technology. So it's a software as a service, basically SaaS, and it can log and track the entire school's every child, every subject test scores. It has analytics. When things go wrong, it flags it, so we know immediately what goes wrong. So this is what we have done. But the interesting part is the way we started our model. This is just one part of it. There are three other things which are different about it. Number one, we said we'll hire a guy who is not a teacher by profession, because if he has a B.Ed degree, in India they call it Bachelor of Education, right? He'll probably go to somewhere else, he'll get a job and he'll not stay with us. So we'll hire a guy who has a BA or BCom, comes from the village, he has a vested interest in staying in that village. So he is stable that way. We'll teach him how to teach, train the trainer, correct?
Yeah.
Because he will be from the local ecosystem, our ability to influence the parents and the teachers will be that much higher if we get accepted. That's number one. Number two, we'll work with the principal of the rural schools who are interested in working with us. We say we don't need any credit. We are not going to take any credit. If we improve the results, you take all the credit in all your government reports. We don't care, right? Number three, we'll provide you 2 teachers or 1 teacher as a supplement, as a complementary to your staff to take up the load that you have. And number 4, bring in the audio video content to make their lives easy. So, and then the 5th one I said is the measurement, right? So these are the 5 things which I think very few NGOs do. Hire locally, collaborate with the teaching staff and the principal, measure everything you do, and sustain your operations, right? So we started with a pilot of 5 schools about 6 years ago. Today we have about 271 schools. We influence 34,000 students. We have 407 teachers on our staff, and we have lifted the scores by 80%. They used to score about 37, 38 because the quality of education in rural India is pretty bad, right? So from 35 and 37, we have gone to about 65, 70 average score.
Very impressive. Yeah.
So our education secretary at the central government, Anil Swarup, he happened to be in India. He saw this in Gujarat. He saw this package. Next thing he said, "Aap Delhi aiye, you come to Delhi, and I want to showcase this to all the state education secretaries." So that's what's going on. He wants to roll it out to a lot of states in India.
After now the acquisition is over, I think you've got. Would you think you'll donate more money to philanthropy compared to last year?
Most certainly. I mean, like I told you, right? One of the reasons I came back to India is to do something about the bottom of the pyramid.
Yeah.
So I'm still going to be with Arrow Electronics for the next 3 years, committed, full-fledged. But at some point in time, when I kind of ease out of that, social transformation is going to be my mantra. That's my next stage.
Amazing. That's really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and there are a lot of ideas. There are a lot of ideas on the waste management, solar energy. Of course, the microfinance is a big thing. And especially with the newer technologies, with the mobile apps and the Paytm and the payment banks and all of that.
Impact entrepreneurship.
It becomes so easier to make that impact.
Yeah, it's really cool. And would you invest money into early stage companies?
That depends.
Of course.
You know, when you are interviewing, the 2 very key words are that depends.
But are you looking at?
Right now, my life is pretty crazy because when the acquisition happens, you are talking about, you know, we are a minnow. The reason, like I said earlier, the reason we got acquired because they want to get into services business.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of commitments
Yeah.
to show them the path to get into the services business. So they have 3,000 salespeople. I have 15. So we have some, you know, interesting work ahead of us.
And how many employees do you have across India?
So worldwide we have about 1,700 engineers,
Yeah.
1,700 employees, about 1,500 engineers.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
And
So we have USA, that's a major, we have about 200 engineers there.
yeah.
And then it's mainly Ahmedabad, Pune, Bangalore and Noida. These are our design centers.
And what are your hobbies? Fun
I read a lot.
You read a lot.
Yeah.
What are you reading now?
Sapiens and Homo Deus, if you've heard of them.
Sapiens I've heard of.
Yeah. So before that, there is a book called The Gene by Siddharth Mukherjee.
Yeah.
My all-time favorite is Conversations with God. I don't know whether you have heard that or not.
That's
Very
who's the
interesting.
author?
Neil Donald Welch.
Okay.
It's about 20-year-old, but fabulous stuff.
And how many books do you read a week?
A week? I don't know. I can't read every week, but in a year, probably these kind of books about 10, 12, something like that.
And what will be your 3 advice to young entrepreneurs?
What I said early on,
5 Ps.
right? Yeah, 5 P's, passion, that's very important.
Okay.
And second thing is don't get married to your idea. Market, what we consider the markets and what really the markets are, there are sometimes gaps there, right? Harvard Business School calls it they came up with a fancy term, emergent behavioral strategy. So basically the whole idea is that you throw something out there, look at the market will respond, but the response is not going to be according to your expectation, right? It might be somewhat different, and you have to do the course correction very quickly. So respond to the market, listen to the customer, and make your course adjustment in your product, in your service, whatever it is, to what the market is asking. Don't get married to your idea, right? That's very important. And finance, very important. So keep an eye on the bottom line. That's very, very critical. I think most of people get into trouble because they don't pay attention to top line and the bottom line. Both are important.
That's very interesting. So I was with Vishal yesterday, no?
Yeah.
So he was telling me the problem with the entrepreneurs is they focus on cash and they don't focus on cash flow.
Yeah, absolutely. So cash flow is, and if you take care of the top line and bottom line, the cash flows will happen.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right?
Yeah, it's very exactly what he said.
Yeah,
In other words,
and especially with the e-commerce and the market share and all of that, it's very easy to get swayed into money burn.
But he's a profitable company. You know, right?
Yeah. So it depends on your risk appetite and your mental makeup and what you want to achieve in life, like I said in the beginning, right? So money burn is okay if you have very clear vision, clear thought process, and patience and persistence to get there. But then you have to find the supply of money inexhaustible.
And I think and I'm sure GST would not have affected you.
No, because 90% is all.
Demonetization would not have affected you. All this government macro would not have affected you.
No, I've been blessed that STP, Software Technology Parks happened, single window clearance happened, this software exports boom happened, and it played right into my strength, the engineering strength and quality and all of that, right? So, but it was it was a Herculean task to set up to be able to do the chip designs in Ahmedabad. And now all the competitors come here. They try to set up the offices. There are 6 chip design companies in Ahmedabad.
Oh wow, which are they?
Small ones. The big ones, one acquisition happened by a large American company called Cadence Designs.
Okay.
And other than that, there are a lot of other small companies.
Okay.
But Wipro comes here for interviewing people over the weekend.
Yeah.
Lot of large companies come here to poach our people.
Which are the small companies that are here?
There is one called Sankalp.
Sankalp.
Yeah. There is another called Shivom. And Sankalp is about 700 people. They are based in Bangalore.
Okay.
But they opened a branch here because there is a talent pool in Ahmedabad.
Sankalp has got Fortune 500 book.
No, they are, I said about 700 engineers.
Engineers, okay.
Yeah. They are in chip design part of it. Yeah. So what is different about Info chips, like you say, embedded, right? But even within embedded, we end up doing the cutting edge stuff, right? And so every time there is a new processor out, you have to master. and you have to be able to do the designs around them. That's what's interesting.
And you have a background in Intel and
I have the background in chip design and the system level software, operating system, networking software, these, that, and other things. And that's what I loved at that time. I still love that. And that's how, there is a saying, when you are a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
great. I think that concludes it. And I'm really, really glad. What about your family? You have
I have a family.
wife and kids?
Yeah,
Yes?
yeah.
Are they all joining the
They're
club?
grown up. No. They are not going to join this business.
Of course.
Well, now
it's
it's, yeah,
but more
now
than
it's
that,
our-
could they manage your funds or how is it?
We'll see. I think it's early days, and they are grown up, but my son is still going to college. So some ways to go.
What are your luxury spends? Do you spend on? Do you like anything?
You see my office, right? Don't see anything. I don't have any taste for luxurious item. Unfortunately, fortunately, what do you want to call it?
Fortunately,
I like to consider myself a simple person, so I don't have too many expensive, quote unquote, expensive tastes.
I think sounds good. I think that's from our side. Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you.
And we'll make this an interview and also in publication as well.
All right, super.
Thank you.